Good morning, everybody. My name is Carlos Timamillo. I'm a partner in the Transaction Advisory Group of Alira Health, and I'm pleased to be one of the co-hosts of this webinar today. We'll just give everybody a minute to log in and be comfortable before we kick it off in just a few seconds. It's 2 minutes past the hour, so let's start. Hello, everybody. Good morning for those of you on Asia Pac time. My name is Carlos Timamillo, partner in the Transaction Advisory Group at Alira Health, and I am one of the co-hosts of this webinar. Before we start reviewing the presentation, introducing the other speakers, let me go through some logistics for today. So all the attendees are muted on the platform, but you can still engage by asking questions through the prompt in the GoToWebinar client. Please type your questions in the toolbar. We'll have a few minutes at the end of the section to review Q&A and engage with you. Please text your questions whenever you want during the presentation, but they will only be addressed at the end of the discussion. The session is recorded, and everybody will receive a follow-up link to access the recording later. And there are a couple of attachments in the handout section of GoToWebinar. Please feel free to download it to learn more about Alira Health and APAC Med. So let's start. A few notes about Alira Health. Alira is a global consulting firm focused in the life sciences. We are a technology-enabled and patient-centric firm with a mission to humanize healthcare. And we do that by providing a platform of services for the development and commercialization for medical technology and therapeutics globally, with an approach that supports the entire life cycle of development and commercialization of from development to medical care, and based on a real-world evidence approach. This webinar is a part of a series that has been hosted by APAC Med in collaboration with Alira Health, called Expanding Beyond APAC, a series of sessions on different topics launched to discuss the strategies, challenges, and best practices to enter new markets and scale your business beyond Asia Pacific. We thank APAC Med for organizing this series, and we were very privileged to provide content and expertise and engaging with the whole APAC Med community. I would like to give the floor for a few words to Gabriel Sim, Director of Strategic Partnerships, who will introduce APAC Med. Gabriel, floor is yours.
Thank you, Carlo, and hello, everyone. Nice to meet all of you here at this webinar, and thank you for having us today as well. My name is Gabriel. I'm the Partnership Director at APAC Med. A very brief introduction about APAC Med. We are a non-profit medical technology association representing companies, both the big companies and the smaller companies that are operating in the medical device, diagnostics, and digital health space. Fundamentally, we lead efforts, to advance, medical technology in order to raise the standards of care for patients. We have a growing number of smaller companies, maybe about 150 companies from across the Asia Pacific region, and many of them are looking at how they can actually grow their presence outside the Asia Pacific region to the UK, US, and Europe. And we are delighted to be able to partner with Alira Health to support our startup community, to give them access to knowledge like what we're having today, as well as networks to the US, UK, and Europe. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and I look forward to today's session.
Thank you, Gabriel. Appreciate your introduction of the association. And now, without further ado, I'm honored to share the stage with my colleague, Dan Pastore. A few words on myself before I assist Dan's introduction. I've been with Alira for 10 years. I'm an investment banker. I've been in transactional for 15 years. The last decade, almost exclusively focused on medical devices. My focus at Alira is supporting strategic partnerships and mergers and acquisition, supporting entrepreneurs and venture-backed organizations to find a path to market and to exit, realizing the value of their investments, but most importantly, leading their technology to market. And Dan, please introduce yourself. It's a real pleasure to share the stage with you today.
Great. Thank you very much, Carlo. Very pleased to be here with the group. As Carlo mentioned, I'm a partner here at Alira Health as well. And I'm focused on the capital raising at Alira Health for healthcare companies looking to raise somewhere between $10 and $50 million in capital, typically more venture capital stage firms opportunities. So it's a real pleasure to be here, but I'm also working closely with our equity crowdfunding platform called RedCrow, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But my background is roughly 20 years in financial services with a focus on institutional investors, helping them understand the landscape, both for policy and regulatory.
I don't know if the audience can still see Dan. Unfortunately, for me, he disconnected. So while we give him a couple of minutes to reconnect, let me invite everybody to join Dan and myself on LinkedIn and follow up after this conversation today, and see, we appreciate the outreach and connecting with the entire community, and we're really eager to meet you and share more about all the topics that we're going to be discussing here today. Let's give Dan a short minute, if you don't mind. Let's give my colleague time to join the platform, and he prompted me separately saying that he's just had a quick difficulty. So while we wait for him, let me tell you what we're going to talk about today on the platform. Dan is going to give an overview of what is the investment sentiment and what are the trends related to funding of medical technology, particularly in a difficult year of 2022. And then we'll shift gears and we'll dive into tips and best practices of how the U.S. capital markets can be accessible for companies, for international companies, and particularly from Asia Pacific. So Dan, thanks for joining. I held the audience for a couple of minutes, just anticipating the content of the presentation. But please, we're pleased to have you back. Oh, can't hear your audio right now. Can't hear you right now. All right. Well, sometimes this happens at the Oscars or other TV events. So it's just a technical difficulty. We'll give Dan a couple of minutes to connect these devices. But my suggestion is let's shuffle up the content of our presentation until Dan joins. It's really not a linear program today. We'll Dan will join us and give us insight about the financing trend. But until he's back, I wanted to sort of introduce what is kind of the cornerstone of our discussion here today, which is interpreting and kind of shedding light about the tools that a medical device early stage or development stage company has to raise capital and engage with strategic and financial sponsors. And we particularly dive into what are the standards of the US market and what tools and what resources can be available to global companies and Asia Pacific innovators particularly. Let me open with this chart that is perhaps self-explanatory and quite intuitive, but basically illustrates the life cycle of the financing needs of a company across their different phases of development. The arrows on top illustrate the all too familiar kind of journey of a general medical technology platform, but it can actually apply also to a biopharmaceutical program exactly the same way, right? So there's an idea on a napkin, or an idea on intellectual property in the design of a device. Then the project moves into a product and process design and towards the prototyping phase. Then there is a broad and very important phase of validation of the technology. Validation means clinical and regulatory pathways to bring to comply with the different global regulations, but provide clinical evidence about the efficacy and safety of the devices. And ultimately, there's the market launch and commercial development of the technology. Most likely, the audience today is representative of different groups, right? And your initiative may be at different steps of this journey. So it would be interesting to share and to get your perspective on this. But the way we view it, the way we consult our client companies is to seek financing sources that are fitting and applicable to the stage of the life cycle where they are. Frequently, in the concept selection, but all the way through the development of an early prototype, so throughout the product and process design, the idea is in its infancy. And it's very unlikely that professional investors like venture capitals are going to want to look at it. So the importance of developing access to private and dilutive and non-dilutive investors for the purpose of seed financing, whether they are friends and family in the very early stages, or angel networks, or grants, or other types of early stage financing that do not take into account the high clinical, regulatory, and technical risk, not to mention the commercial risk of the device, is very important. Typically, the inflection point until the company becomes mature to raise capital from venture capital, and then I see you're back. Please give me a sign if your audio is back on then.
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Carlo?
Yes. You're back on. I'm stealing a little bit of your presentation, but you will elaborate more on this in just a couple of minutes. I was going to say that the inflection point when the venture capital can be interested in your project, in funding your project, is typically some milestone of clinical or regulatory development. When you have covered enough ground in the journey to determine that your device has a path to market, whether supported by clinical evidence or whether because it is cleared by the international agencies like the FDA or other government agencies to be commercialized in the market. Then we'll speak more in a few minutes about what it means in terms of readiness and typical sizes and typical approaches to the venture capital world when I give the word back to him. My personal expertise is actually on the later stages of this chart. Naturally, the goal of every entrepreneur, but especially of its investors, is to navigate the development process, equip the company with financial resources to be successful, and ultimately realize the investment through an exit. At Alira, we are experts at navigating this process and engaging with strategics that can either be commercial partners or ultimately acquirers for your company. There is really no, it's never early enough to start developing your network of relationship with the strategic players that are stakeholders in your market and that have a portfolio that could be a good fit for your company. That means from the very early stages of prototype development and clinical validation, you should pursue ways to engage with the corporate players and develop relationship and be on the radar screen. But that doesn't mean that they're going to want to partner with you or acquire you. Usually that happens in proximity of the commercial launch of the company. And the tendency of corporate players is to be quite averse to any type of risk that is not commercial risk. So clinical studies, regulatory risk. They prefer to partner with technologies and innovators that have de-risked their program independently, and therefore that have raised venture capital and have been able to carry their company through the tribulations and the tests of the validation phase. But once those are achieved, it becomes very important to keep very close relationships with the parties that ultimately will decide whether they want to buy you or not. Just to give you some parameters, the development programs that are really focused on innovation and the introduction of new sophisticated procedures, they tend to carry more weight in the achievement of regulatory clinical milestones. That also means that if you're, for example, developing a class 3 device in a very high, in a very big unmet clinical need that is also, has the support of strong healthcare economics, and therefore is kind of the black swan for the market or for medical innovation in general. You're much more likely for a strategic partner to want to engage with you and extend proposals to partner via licensing or commercial development or even clinical development together, right? So the early commercialization becomes a very fertile moment to start this type of discussion. But it's true that 90% of the innovative medical device exits happen when a company has reached $15 million or more in recurring revenue, right? So when there is an uptake in the commercialization proven by access to the market and by a growing number of accounts that have repeated purchases. That of course varies depending on the therapeutic area and the type of market. But we have had experiences of exits at very different stages of the life cycle, and we'd be very interested to learn where you are with your company and how we could help you to achieve that. Now, since Dan is back on, I would like to reset the presentation and shift gears a little bit. And we talked about, these continuum of capital needs and different types of sources of financing. Then please feel free to elaborate on what I've shared so far, and perhaps put that into context with the current environment for venture investments in medical device innovation. And I will be happy to manage the presentation to take you back to your earlier content.
Sure. Thank you, Carlo. And apologies for the technological difficulties. But Carlo, if you could pull me back to the venture capital and life science slide, that would be great. And I think what we'll do with this slide is, I think as a backdrop, it's important to understand the capital market situation in the United States. Certainly, if you're looking to raise capital from U.S. venture firms or family offices, you want to understand what's going on in the marketplace. So if you're following the financial news and macroeconomic news, these charts may not come too much of a surprise to you, but wanted to give you a little bit of the flavor and put it into numbers. I think there are some interesting observations to make here. So we did take a look at this from a broad life sciences and healthcare perspective in selecting the data to evaluate here. We narrowed this down to deal sizes over $10 million in the United States over the past few years, breaking them down between pharma, biotech, digital health, and of course MedTech, where we're focused and interested for today's discussion. But I think it's interesting to note in the chart on the left-hand side that while it's clear that numbers are down in 2022 year to date, those are year to date numbers through the third quarter, that taking into consideration the remarkable year that we had in 2021 from a deal standpoint, we're actually on pace to meet, if not exceed, the deal flow and numbers from 2020. So while, again, the macroeconomic environment certainly had an impact on the private market fundraising, we are actually seeing some still fairly historic numbers that are being reflected, again, year to date. And we'll dig in on the next slide in a moment to see how the year 2022 is breaking down and what trends we might be able to evaluate. But I think it's also interesting to note in the middle chart here as well that we're certainly seeing from a late stage standpoint, the deal flow as a percentage of the total amount of deal counts, we're actually seeing some of the late stage deals holding up. So if you look at that chart on the right-hand side, 2020, 2022 in the middle chart, that you're looking at that number of 401 deals is still reflecting a 61% share of the total amount of deals that have been done so far in 2022. So late stage deals are certainly still getting a focus from investors coming in at that stage. And again, we're seeing those numbers, the deal count certainly down. We still may see that match the numbers in 2020, but I think also notable to take into consideration that it's still very close and is obviously going to exceed what we did in 2019. So I think also notable on the right-hand chart is what really jumped out at me is that the early stage deals are still increasing into and through 2022 thus far. So investors are still taking a look at from at least the deal size is still fairly robust. So we're getting some large deals that are coming through at the early stage. So the amount of dollars that are coming in is still again very robust, even though it's coming down at the late stage. We can see that from 21 to 22, going from 32 down to 28. It's really notable that we see that the early stage deals are popping here. So again, we'll see if that continues as we come into Q4 and as we see it as an indicator into 2024, importantly. So Carlo, maybe on the next slide, we'll take a deeper dive into the left-hand chart here. This is breaking down this year 2022 into some more detail, and I think this is a bit telling, and we might be able to extrapolate Q3 performance potentially into Q4. We would expect that there may be a slowdown with the end of the year holidays that would impact some deals coming through, but we'll wait to see how that looks. So at this stage, again, you can see how things are trading off a bit here. If you take a look at those numbers, the pharma biotech deals are certainly coming down. So that may not be a surprise as well. If you were to look from Q1 to Q2 to Q3, pharma biotech deals in Q1 represented 71% of all the deals that were done. In Q2, it was down to 61%, and in Q3 down to 58%. And the gainer a bit from here is MedTech that we see at the bottom. That from quarter to quarter, we've seen it go from 12% in Q1 to 16% in Q2 to now 19% in Q3. So we're seeing MedTech deals, maybe institutional investors are shifting a bit out of pharma and biotech and putting more money to work in MedTech, which should be interesting for all on this call. On the right-hand chart, I would just note again here that we had a good start in Q1. Q1 was looking up quarter over quarter from a total capital invested, but again we saw that really drain off in Q2 and Q3, and I think we can extrapolate and expect that Q4 may have a similar type trend that's developing. So Carlo, maybe on the next slide, we kind of get back onto pace here, and I caught part of yours as I had to log back in, that you really did cover, I think, this fairly well. So I don't think we need to spend too much time here. I would just emphasize that since a lot of my efforts tend to focus on venture capital opportunities that would fall in the $10 to $50 million type range, just on average, I would say that, you know, what's really important to focus here for VCs is on, you know, getting data, having strong, unassailable data that really can validate the product, validate what you're bringing to market. I've seen more VCs that are focused on, you know, picking up, you know, more accretive deals. So opportunities that are generating cash already or are close to generating revenue. I think more and more VCs have an eye towards picking up opportunities that maybe are de-risked both from a commercialization standpoint and also, you know, from a regulatory standpoint as well. And have been hearing that and speaking with VCs and also hearing VCs at recent conferences. That is really where they're focusing. They're focusing on, again, companies that can help drive revenue, that the market's validating, that the regulators are validating, and can really improve their overall portfolios. I would also say that some of the points that they're bringing up in this is the, you know, management and strength of management is very important to them. Especially in these times, they need to feel comfortable that the management team knows how to be flexible in this environment, that they know that valuations are coming under pressure, and that company managements can be realistic about their valuation expectations and nimble financially as well. So we hear about capital efficiency coming up quite a bit in this environment as well. So as you're going out to raise, keep some of these things in mind. If these are strengths of you and of yours and your management team, let's bring that out in your presentations, in your pitch decks, and bring that up front, because these will all be important indicators that institutional investors are looking for. Carlo, maybe on to the next slide.
Here you are.
And also, I think following on that, maybe that comes in seamlessly here as well as we're trying to bring out some of your important, valuation or value indicators of what you're bringing to an investor, why they should invest. It's very important to get that out in front. So on the left-hand side of this chart is probably where I'll spend most of the time on this next section. And that's to really be effective in communicating in a very clear, simple way your ideas. And I'd like to say a great exercise is just, work that elevator pitch that's so critically important. You have to be able to, if you're catching an investor, to be able to articulate what you're bringing to the table, why they should invest, how they will make their money, and make the money for their limited partners as well. So very important to have an elevator pitch down. It's also very important because when you start to send out your communications and you're communicating to folks, this is what we do. We want to make sure that the message can be communicated effectively in what we would call some quick bullets in an email that is the first thing that an investor will look at before they even get to looking at an executive summary. So I really try to narrow this down to maybe half a dozen or 6 one-line bullet points that are very effective in communicating the details of the quality of your investment and why they should be paying attention to it. As you might imagine, institutional investors receive hundreds of these every single month. So the best thing you can do to put your idea forward in their mind is to be clear and effective. So you'll hear me repeat that several times because it's very important. So with an executive summary, which is of course an attachment that we would have to an email, sometimes the first outreach that we have with a detailed, with a more simple presentation, we try to limit it to say 8 slides. And again, does not need to be a hard and fast rule, but I think generally the structure, again, should follow the way that I will lay it out right now. So the first slide, I usually like to say, and I like to pull this forward, people like to put it at the end of their presentation, but if you put your summary of investment highlights right up front and make that very clear, you can always reiterate those investment bullets at the end of your presentation. But sometimes if you wait too long, you may have an investor just, if it's not becoming clear to them, they just might not get to the back of your presentation. So I say pull that forward, get those investment highlights up front, and you can tell them more about it later in the executive summary. So a one-pager would just say, again, elaborate on 8 bullets, a little bit more detail this time, but they should be the ideas and the concepts that you want them to walk away remembering very clearly and effectively. So after that, we like to identify the problem and the current landscape. So understanding, the competitors that are there, but defining the problem, I think is very important. You can talk about market size, you can talk about the total addressable market, but it's very important to make sure that you're identifying the problem that you're looking to address as a clinical unmet need. And then following that, you could probably have two slides dedicated to what your solution is to that problem that you just laid out. And there should be a nice transition and smooth connection between those two. So again, you can spend more time defining the technology. It's always good, especially if you have a device, to provide a visual for it as well, so they can create that connection visually to what you're explaining. It also helps break up the text quite a bit. So don't focus on telling them too much about every bit of detail on the technology. but the critical main points, let's make sure that we get those across. So the next slide, we would usually try to identify as the regulatory pathway is going to be critically important coming into the United States. So what's your approach going to be with the FDA? If you can articulate that well, it's going to show that you clearly have an understanding. If you've had conversations with the FDA already, important to illuminate here as well. And also part of that, of course, is your reimbursement strategy. So how are you going to get paid? How are you going to be reimbursed? How are doctors going to be reimbursed? How important is this for payers? There's many payer relations hot buttons that you need to focus on. And a lot of those are hitting, what are you doing for the patient? How is it improving their quality of life? How good are your outcomes? Are they safe outcomes? And also, to what extent is your product saving the healthcare system money? So how cost effective is it, while also providing great outcomes and great outcomes for your patient? So I think those are all very important details to make sure that you have laid out as part of your reimbursement strategy. I would next lay out a pro forma of financials, and with that, and next to it, you can mention a little bit about your raise. So the use of proceeds, I would just detail in several line items how you're going to allocate the money that you're looking to raise. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the management is critically important. So if you have your management team, as well as medical advisory board or KOLs that you have on board, this is a great time to make sure that that's part of your executive summary. So going back to the left-hand box over here, I mentioned the management presentation of 20 to 25 slides. That's a good size slide deck to get through if you're getting your first meeting with an investor, for you to introduce the idea to them. And you can probably get that done effectively in 40 minutes and leave time for questions and the back and forth that naturally comes during the course of a conversation with an investor. And then, of course, one thing we work with as an investment bank is putting together the detailed offering memorandum that has all the regulatory checkoffs that you need on it, talking about the risk factors that are involved and the proper disclaimers as well, that the regulators in the US will be very keen to make sure that you have included in your presentation. So part of also being prepared, and when you've done an effective job on your deck and you've had your initial introductory meetings, is also the diligence process. And the diligence process we could identify as, or narrow it down to say, create a strong, solid data room that has everything that a potential investor will need to see. A secure data room. If you can do it outside of something like Dropbox and use something highly secure, something that institutional investors are used to navigating, that can be very effective and is a good sign that you've got a detailed, well put together strategy. So again, we would work very carefully with our clients, helping them, guiding them through how that data room should be created, making sure the information is in there so that when you do have an interested investor, the process runs very smoothly. So on the right-hand side here, from a syndicate standpoint, we would want to make sure that we get in a strong lead investor. That builds a lot of confidence for smaller co-investors or syndicate players to come in that possibly don't have the resources to do all the due diligence that's involved in one of these fundraisers. So it's great if you can get a lead investor that gives a lot of confidence. We even have strategics that we speak with that say, often we like to see a VC on board that has a strong reputation in the space. Say it's cardiology. If it's a VC that has a lot of experience with that, that gives a strategic a lot of confidence that somebody has done a great deal of work on this already, that has a strong reputation in the space. So that's an important part, building a strong syndicate so that they can help round off your deal. Say if you're doing a $20 million raise, you can get a lead investor in for half of that. You can build your syndicate throughout some smaller players that you've had ongoing discussions with for some time. So, Carlo, I think next slide.
Yeah, before we move on to the next slide, just my 2 cents from the perspective of best practices of engagement with strategic partners. They really, align with your communication, your approach towards financial sponsor, and relating back to what you said regarding building a strong deck with clear, articulated story about the strategic fit of the device, the market fit, the total addressable market, but also the business model, and the healthcare economics and reimbursement strategy, as well as your clinical and regulatory strategy. Those are going to be fundamental topics and tools that you're going to have to use wisely to engage with an acquirers, right? And it's very typical at the earlier stages of development that while you're seeking institutional financing, you may also be reaching out to strategic partner to see if their corporate venture arm may be interested in funding your company, and ultimately you will be valued on the same merit that investors consider when making investment allocations, which is the potential commercial success of the device, right? So the same elements build a very solid deck and proposition for investors as well as strategic partners. Shifting gears, what we wanted to share with you today, outside of kind of the soft insights about engaging with potential partners, whether financial of strategic interest, is what are the technical forms of access to funding? What are the sources that are available to global companies, particularly when approaching the U.S. market? The point I would like to make before covering, the categories in this slide is that it is important to have a well laid out, comprehensive strategy to fund your company with exhausting all the tools available. And also, as we saw earlier, the type of financing that you may need today is not what you're going to need 12 months or 24 months from today as you hit more milestones, right? So it is important to have, I think, a comprehensive appreciation for what is available out there, and also how can you position your company, particularly as an entrepreneurship team or a management team that is not located in the United States yet. How can you access this type of resources? So looking at the content of the slide here, and simply looking at the headlines, non-dilutive financing includes everything that is basically not equity, right? So it could be venture debt, so a type of loan that you get from the financial system, as well as any type of grants or credits from the government. Convertible debt is a form of debt financing that is meant to convert into equity at certain conditions, and we'll review in a minute what these are. Equity financing is simply, selling a portion of your equity to investors, setting a price and a valuation for your enterprise value. and these investors will be part of your cap table and will participate in the business risk and the potential return based on the outcome of your business development. Now, having set the stage, what are kind of the key highlights that as a global company you should be aware of when approaching the U.S. market, and how challenging, and what are the challenges that you may face in pursuing certain type of financing? When we talk about non-dilutive funding, this is a very important lever that particularly domestic companies in the United States take advantage of before, to generate some traction and momentum before they're, mature enough to go out to private investors. And I'm certain that there are organizations and agencies in, across the Asia Pacific region that also provide, incentives for innovations in your countries. So needless to say, accessing this type of financing as a foreignly domiciled organization is more challenging than if you were, a company fully established in the United States. Just to review a few cases. The realm of research grants that are typically issued towards, by the National Institute of Health and its or the Department of Defense and their branches are most typically only available to companies that have an entity and their, the use of funds firmly established in the United States. For example, the NIH SBIR grant, which is a very powerful tool for the MedTech ecosystem, is only fundable for domiciled companies, and proceeds from this grant cannot be distributed or paid to consultants or vendors outside of the United States. There are exceptions to the rule. For example, the DoD program, DARPA, being probably the most established, also give pathways for foreign companies to access their, these funds, because the scope of the Department of Defense, unlike the NIH, is not funding the domestic innovation community, but it's rather acquiring technologies that are valuable and that are of strategic interest for the United States. So these grants are available also to global companies. Looking at the venture debt space, that is really not something that is feeding to early stage companies before the Series B stage. It's very unlikely that companies at the Series A and below can access to any type of unsecured loan from banks or venture debt organization. The reason is, as a company that is burning cash, does not reach break even, is not financially sustainable, the main form of repayment of these facilities is the raise of the next round. So venture debt organizations carry a lot of risk based on the continuous ability of your company to be funded at multiple stages of venture capital. So this is also a quite challenging type of financing that is, for non-US domiciled companies. Tax credit is also, something that has more to do with where you file the taxes. So if you have commercial operation in the United States, you may have access to that, but it's a very unlikely and not meaningful form of financing of innovation. Convertible debt is the mainstream tool to fund companies up to the seed stage or throughout the seed stage, and sometimes also between venture rounds as a form of bridge financing. The reason is the incredible flexibility of convertible notes or safes, which are the two main types of the main options in Israel, to really customize the terms that appeal your investors, and that they're short contracts that are easy to negotiate. They're well suited for private negotiations as opposed to to syndicates. And they're really the principal form of fundraise of companies that have not yet reached a point where they can comfortably set a valuation. Sometimes, especially when you are in your early stages, the ambition to set a value for your enterprise value for your enterprise may not be in the best interest of the company or of your investors. Convertible debt gives you the opportunity to raise capital and basically convert those funds into equity at a valuation that is set by the market or is set by the next equity fundraise. So it gives flexibility, ease of access to the capital, and avoids uncomfortable conversations with the private investors about value at the early stages of your of development. As I mentioned, the applicability in cases of bridge financing between one round and the other, the benefit is getting some financial resources onto your balance sheet without locking the company into a valuation that may deter investors in your next financing round. So very, very powerful tool. The only notable difference between convertible notes and safes, which are typically a US-based form of contract, is that safes are not meant to generate interest rates, so they do not accrue interest. They do not have a specified maturity, and typically the conversion terms are very clear, and the only thing that is negotiated with investors is the price or the price cap of the conversion. Convertible notes, more broadly speaking, have some more complexity. They may include some thresholds or conversion triggers based, for example, on how big what is the next round. What is the minimum amount of capital that you need to raise to trigger a conversion? And as I alluded, they do accrue and yield interest, and they have a maturity, so they're meant to be converted. Are meant to be converted typically within a period of 24 months or the vicinity of that. Concluding, I think what is probably most interesting and the primary focus, or let's say long-term focus for any entrepreneur in the room, is the forms of private placement that are typical of the US market. First of all, what does private placement mean? It's a technical definition of offering your capital, your equity, to investors in the United States. The capital markets in the US are regulated by the SEC, and any form of solicitation of investors or whether private or institutional needs to follow strict rules. In private, the definition of private placement alludes to the fact that these are not public fundraisers, and therefore there is not a general solicitation of the public, but rather that you are soliciting private investors, and that the purpose of investments is not trading. The contrast is, of course, with the public fundraising that is the dimension of publicly listed companies, whether pre or post IPOs. So in the realm of private placement, which is really defines the universe of venture financing, majority of venture investments are done through the private market. There are a few options that fit kind of the certain regulations and certain criteria to promote your offerings. I go through some important cases that you may want to note and learn more about in the future. Reg D and Reg S are two types of offering that are focused on accredited investors. What that means is investors that have a certain proficiency in evaluating the risk of certain investments. Professional and institutional investors are all accredited, but if you approach private individuals, they may be accredited or not, and that threshold is defined basically on their income or wealth. So as I was saying, Reg D prioritizes, accredited investors. That means that you can access to a pool of investors that have a certain level of experience, and that avoids the need to register your offering with the SEC, therefore saving a lot of time in the preparation of the legal and operational aspect of the fundraising. Reg S is exactly the same thing, and it's actually an important tool for global fundraisers because offers the same benefits of Reg D, but applied to issuers, so to a fundraising company that is not located in the United States. So that's a typical tool that if you have an attorney located in the United States, can probably point you to this tool. In a minute, we'll shift gears and look at two types of private placements that are actually more novel and fascinating and potentially attractive tools to raise capital, which are Reg A and Reg CF. Reg A is actually a type of offering that is only that is limited to U.S. and Canadian issuers. So you would have to establish your fundraising entity in the United States, but is a hybrid model that is somewhere between the flexibility of a Reg D and a journey towards the public market, therefore IPO. And there are different criteria to fit a Reg A. It's a quite complex offering, takes many months to prepare. But the stocks issued through a Reg A are tradable, and therefore succeeding in raising a Reg A round positions your company one step closer to the public market. And finally, Reg CF is probably the most innovative of these tools. It was recently established as a tool to promote crowdfunding. Therefore, public and I will get back to the public aspect, solicitations of investments through a digital platform. Technically, any type of investor can be solicited through a Reg CF, also non-accredited, so the general public. And this is still not a public financing. It still falls under the definition of private placements because shares are not tradable. Therefore, but you may be familiar with crowdfunding. There's been an interesting experience in the US market about platforms that facilitate the engagement of the crowd and the raise of funds from a general crowd of supporters. That is growing quite fast in the United States market. And as Alira, we are quite, a trailblazer in this sense, because we have a proprietary platform for crowdfunding that is particularly indicated for seed to Series A stage companies. And I'm sure that Dan will cover some of the criteria to be part of our platform in just a minute.
Sure. Thank you, Carlo. And I know we're going to be tight on time, so I won't reiterate all of the details here. Carlo already specified some of them, but on the crowdfunding platform that we have at Red Crow, we're particularly excited to help earlier stage companies. As I mentioned, I tend to focus on 10 to, raises over $10 million. But with equity crowdfunding and the addition of the Red Crow platform to Alira, it really provides a great opportunity for earlier stage companies to get involved and raise the first, bit of money from a larger raise. If you're beyond friends and family, if you're beyond some of your non-dilutive debt accelerator, incubator fundraising and raising, one-off from individuals, really channeling the power of the crowd that we've developed at Red Crow, that has sophisticated investors that have joined, many because we're healthcare only, are physicians, they're nurses, they are entrepreneurs themselves who have been there and done that, and they understand this environment. There's a great deal of investors in this space that not only are in it for great returns and opportunities, but there's a great sense of altruism. There's a great sense of supporting an area that is of particular focus and interest of theirs, because they had someone that they was close to them that suffered from a particular indication, or themselves have been a patient in this area. So we find that there's a tremendous opportunity to tap into investors in the United States who are spending more time and have more interest getting involved in pre-IPO companies. So often investors who are active investors are focused on trading publicly traded and listed companies in their portfolios. But particularly when we see some macroeconomic conditions change and the public markets tend to be roiled and turned upside down, people are looking increasingly for alternative asset classes. And one of those alternative asset classes is private market investing. So we really do think that in the United States, and we've seen it from some of the European countries, are really interested in expanding their horizons and investing in some companies at an early stage. Not only for a potential financial gain, but again, because they truly believe in what these companies are doing and feel that the products and services really needed to get into the hands of not only doctors, but to patients ultimately as well. So it's a terrific way for investors to get access to this, and for companies, importantly, that are pre-institutional fundraising, but also they've maybe expired some of their fundraising capability through angel investors or non-dilutive financing. So we'd love to answer more questions for you if you have an interest in equity crowdfunding and what the Red Crow platform might be able to do for you. So please feel free to follow up with us on that standpoint.
Thank you, Dan. We are now opening, nearly opening to questions and answers. I'll just very briefly wrap up our content. We want to make sure that we are able to address the questions received so far. a few notions of how Alira Health can help you. It was perhaps self-evident by the comments of Dan regarding the ability to support both early stage fundraising through our crowdfunding platform, as well as more institutional engagement and a greater ticket sizes from $10 million and above in the person of Dan and his financing team. We are also well suited to support your strategic engagements and help you communicate and attract the interest of potential licensing or commercial partners, or ultimately business acquirers, right? So our organization covers this life cycle end to end, and we're very happy to engage with development stage companies, no matter their phase of of their journey, and build long-term relationships. And typically, we are quite effective at walking companies throughout multiple milestones of their capital raise and partnering cycle. So we encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions about our services. Let's have a review of your Q&A, and I have one for Dan. Dan, what type of devices are getting funded at a seed stage? Is it just the IP? So what I guess this means is what are some examples of seed rounds, and what is the goal of seed rounds, and how do you structure one based on the phase of development of the technology? Just rephrasing, paraphrasing the question.
Well, as far as opportunities that are coming across, I would emphasize some of the things that we talked about before. Really, you need to show some, a little bit of progress on getting data, something that someone can hold on to and dig deeper into. If it's a seed stage round, obviously you're going to want to make sure that you've got enough data, that you've defined the market, that it's a sizable enough market, but that you've also derived some data, again, that can be analyzed. Again, the most common feedback we get tends to be, it is too early for us, for an institutional investor. But at the end of the day, if you can show an early stage development and some positive progress, I think that's very important. Even more important for med device, I think, to be able to get beyond that stage, because the next is commercialization. They're going to want to see something that at least has a visibility towards being adopted and applied into the marketplace.
Fantastic. And then there's another question for you here down the list. It touches the aspect of more mature ventures, and what are the options and about approaching the exit market or the IPO market still during an expansion of their venture cycles, while they're still raising venture financing?
Well, often, when we're talking about exits, we go through what we call a dual track process. Anytime we are raising capital, for a company, we're approaching financial investors, but we're also approaching strategic investors at the same time. So we will speak to their corporate venture arm. If they don't have a venture arm per se, we will still be in conversation with their development team, with their business development team, and talk to them about an investment, in the company. It's an opportunity for the strategic to get a seat on the board, even if it's an observer seat. It's an opportunity for them to track the company, to track the space as well. But sometimes those conversations that start as a potential investment also transition into setting the stage for a possible exit through acquisition. So we would call that part of our dual track process. Sometimes it naturally flows from one into the other. And at the very least, a strategic investment from a corporate investor is often the beginning stages of setting up a potential acquisition opportunity down the road.
Thank you, Dan. We have time for one last question, and I will address it just for time purposes. We've been asked, how do seed funders view the seed market location, developing versus developed markets, large versus small home markets? It's clear that access to seed funding depends a lot on relationships, and thinking to syndicate a seed funding round with investors that are located across the ocean or in a distant market where you don't have strong relationships or a high cachet is very challenging. To pursue the US market, it's very important to establish a network of clinical advisors and business advisors that can sort of augment the validation and the credibility of your project locally, right? And that is important to also to access local investor groups and get that type of opportunity. It is definitely challenging to think of raising a private round for a foreign entity with US private investors. But that's where the power of the crowd and the kind of the distribution channels of a digital platform like RedCrow or other crowdfunding platforms come into play, and that can create a lot of benefit, because the location of innovation or an entrepreneurial team or a management team or talent becomes secondary. What really matters is the idea, the ability to execute on a plan and to address unmet needs with innovative technologies. With that, unfortunately, we don't have time to take any more questions, but we encourage you to reach out to Dan and myself, and we can hopefully help you offline, and we'll make ourselves available. But in the meantime, thank you so much. Thanks APAC for hosting us and for these nice questions. It was a pleasure to be here today and hopefully share some insights about the mechanics and the best practices to access the US capital market. And we wish you a great continuation of your week, and I look forward to being in touch with everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo.